Muy buenas a todos, enviciados y enviciadas, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo estáis? Bueno, como os dije en el final del capítulo anterior, hoy estamos aquí para escuchar unos pocos de casetes, ¿no? Vamos a hacer un capítulo un poco especial, pero bueno, que ya hacía falta. Yo por lo menos tengo bastantes ganas de escuchar los casetes, porque me he jugado todos los juegos, como sabéis, hablan de cosas bastante interesantes, y yo la verdad que ya os aviso de que, por si a alguien no le ha quedado claro, que deberíais de saberlo, pero bueno, en este capítulo de hoy no vamos a hacer ninguna misión, ni principal ni secundaria, ¿vale? Simplemente nos vamos a dedicar a ver los casetes, así que los que no os interese, gracias por haber visto el vídeo, ya os podéis ir. Los demás, los que os sí interesen. Los que os... Joder, qué mal hablo, macho, parezco retarder. A los que os interesa, me cago en todo. Bueno, recordáis que el cassette primero de Quiet, el de la francotiradora que aparece, ya lo escuchamos. No lo voy a volver a poner porque recuerdo que era bastante largo. Efectivamente, 2 minutos. Pero bueno, como está fresco total, en el capítulo anterior no fue hace 2. Está ahí, lo podéis escuchar, al final del capítulo, ¿vale? No sé si estamos en el capítulo... Bueno, ¿qué más da el capítulo que estamos? 2 capítulos atrás, ¿vale? Vamos a ver, venga, vamos a empezar. ¿Cómo lo vamos a ir haciendo? Pues yo le voy a dar aquí al play, ¿vale? Voy a dejar que suenen los 2 casetes y pues cuando acaben iré comentando lo que me parezca, ¿no? Si veo que hay algo muy importante, tengo que parar un cassette, pues bueno, lo paramos a medias, no pasa nada y luego lo seguimos escuchando, ¿vale? El caso que cada 2 casetes, bueno, cada grupo de casetes es cuando yo voy a rajar un poquito. Venga, pa'lante.
When Quiet first came here, she demonstrated her marksmanship against that enemy fighter plane. It showed she was much more than your everyday crack shot. Hitting a moving target from 600 meters is a challenge, but it's possible with the right training and equipment. But shooting down that missile, that's a world apart from taking out a soldier on patrol. The chopper and the missile were in motion, meaning different vectors at high velocity in 3-dimensional space, and she shot an unguided bullet that had to fight air resistance and gravity. All that while the chopper was taking evasive maneuvers. Some of the best target leading I've ever known. She has a superhuman sense of spatial awareness. You put her in a fighter jet, and she'd be an ace right off the bat. Hell, your judgment was top class too. Realizing she could take out that pilot, that's quick thinking. You and Quiet could make a hell of a team. You'd be damn near unstoppable. Quiet is still in her cell. Only a few staff are authorized to go near her. She hasn't tried anything funny, but that's what bothers me most. In particular? What does she have to gain by coming to Mother Base? I first thought she was under orders from Cypher to take you out. She didn't manage it in Afghanistan, so round 2 happens here. So I lighten the guard. And that lock on her door is a joke. You gave her an opening. And? Well, she hasn't killed you yet. And I hate to say it, but she's had plenty of chances. You made me the bait. Poisonous bait. What better? Anyway, she didn't bite. Quiet is keeping her silence. So I'm left with no idea again what she's doing here. We tried communicating with her through writing. That didn't work either. Whether she's illiterate, dyslexic, or just plain stubborn, she won't cooperate. I just don't get it. If she tried to contact the outside, it'd be picked up by our counterintelligence net. But it's clean. There's no sign she's had contact with the staff, the base facilities, nothing. She's almost got the men wanting her to try something, just to find out what she's up to. And she's in there putting on the failed soldier look, all downcast eyes and defeated sighs. But she doesn't kill herself. She can't be trying to leave Cypher and surrender to us. So what's the verdict? This may sound optimistic, but here's how I see it. Quiet came here to fulfill some objective. To kill you, maybe to destroy Diamond Dogs. Whatever it was, before she could do it, something changed her mind. Yes. When I look at her, I sense hesitation. You think she betrayed Cypher? Can't say for sure. I prefer the ones that talk. Anyway, we'll keep her under watch. And we're also looking into those special abilities of hers. You'll be the first to know if something comes up. Why not look in on her yourself once in a while? Right.
Qué gracioso el amigo Ocelot, ¿no? Ahora resulta que él no sabe nada acerca de Cypher y de Quiet. Pero sí que tenía razón en una cosa, y es que es un poco extraño, ¿no? La situación de Quiet aquí. O sea, no está claro si se ha rendido, ¿no? En cuanto a la misión que le mandó Cypher. Tampoco sabemos qué misión era, pero bueno, se puede intuir, ¿no? Destruir a Snake o a Diamond Dogs o a los dos. Lo cierto es que la tía ya... Yo por lo menos no tengo nada que sospechar de ella, porque como tampoco la vemos que hace nada raro, simplemente está ahí en su celda, no sé. No me termino de fiar. A ver, lo que quiero decir, yo antes no me fiaba de Quiet para nada, y más después de la primera misión que hicimos. Y ahora tampoco termino de fiarme de ella, pero cierto es que la estamos dejando, ¿no? Ahí, ella a su bola, no... Le estamos quitando importancia a su misión y puede que ese sea su papel, ¿no? Hacernos pensar a todos que ya ha abandonado Cypher y en realidad es lo que Cypher quiere, ¿no? Para que cuando llegue la hora de la verdad, ¡pum!, nos explote la mierda en la cara. No sé. Y luego me ha hecho mucha gracia una cosa que han comentado. Dice, joder, es que Quiet es la puta ama, tío. Es una máquina. La montas en un helicóptero y le mete un disparo en la cabeza al tío del avión. Y al mismo tiempo que el helicóptero estaba haciendo maniobras evasivas, no le tembló el pulso. Digo, pues la puta ama, digo, ya. Estamos de acuerdo, ¿no? La puta ama. En esa cinemática se la marcó. Pero luego en las misiones que me ha acompañado, la verdad es que yo no estoy muy satisfecho con ella, ¿eh? Y quitando la misión esa que me salvó el culo y salvó la misión y hicimos la misión gracias a ella, eso sí, además ese día le tuve que dar un 10. Pero el resto de veces Quiet es un poco useless. Si no estuviese el perro, diría, oh sí, que como mola Quiet, ¿no? Pero como está el perro, que lo hace todo mucho mejor que ella, la verdad. Quiet, para lo que la uso, ya sabéis que es para descubrir la posición de los enemigos. Y lo malo de Quiet es que ya me he fijado que cuando un enemigo te descubre, ¿no? Se pone en modo reflejo, Quiet muchas veces le da por atacarle. Y es que eso pues puede poner en peligro bastante la misión. No sé, sospechosa. Creo que hay más de Quiet. Ya te digo que sí hay más.
Boss, Dwight still hasn't made any moves. It's got me thinking. What? If you took her on a mission, she might break her silence. You want to let her out? Sure. Make her no different to the others. Everyone you pick up works for themselves, right? But her... I say work with her. See what happens. I wouldn't ask this of anyone but you. On missions, I'll make sure we have someone observing from a distance, and she won't be allowed access to all of the base. As for Miller, well, sometimes it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. The best part is, hiding is her specialty. If no one sees her leave the base, the staff will be none the wiser. And if she gets away? If that happens, you'll have to take care of her. But I have faith in you, boss. I think Quiet sees something in you. It's a big risk. But it's for the good of all of us. And besides, you can't deny her talent. Her unique skills and abilities would give you a hell of an edge out there. I'll think it over.
Sí, a ver, si Quiet es buena, pero es que el chucho es mejor, o sea, eso está claro. Luego también me da rabia, ya lo he comentado varias veces, ¿no? Que Snake o Big Boss, como le queráis llamar, ignora a Ocelot cuando Ocelot en el primer juego, madre mía, era de todo menos bueno. Y aquí, o sea, en el primer juego era malo, luego en el primer juego me refiero al Metal Gear 3, ¿no? El primer juego de Big Boss. Luego en los otros dos no apareció, ni pincha ni corta, y ahora en este ha aparecido como, soy bueno, hala. Para Mother Base.
How long are we gonna keep that woman here?
You mean Quiet?
My personal feelings aside, she's putting everybody on edge. You should hear the stories. I got sick from just standing guard at her cell. I won't stand on the same platform as that witch. She hit me for no reason.
What is this, a private army or a kindergarten?
The thing is, they're all serious. They're faced with something they don't understand, and a kind of mass hysteria has broken out. I've gotten wind of countless plots to take her out.
There are no grounds for this suspicion whatsoever. Put yourself in her shoes, assuming they see her as a prisoner here. No, even more so, if they do, she deserves to be treated humanely. I always thought our men were a bit more noble-minded, but... Look, I understand this is a stressful line of work, but to make her the scapegoat...
You've got it wrong. Quiet? She's with Cypher. We have men that lost their buddies to her organization.
You could say that about more than just her. Plenty of the men used to fight for another side, but they've all put that aside to work for the boss.
Cypher is different. And if you ask me, the boss is the biggest problem. Why is he protecting her? Some of the guys are starting to suspect him of... I don't agree with keeping her here either.
So what's your move? Throw her out? Kill her? She's our ticket to Cypher. and her physical abilities are outstanding. We could use someone like her.
Don't make me sick.
Her marksmanship, speed, stealth capabilities for a start. Then, there are the other things we've learned. Quiet appears to be able to use both eyes as master eyes simultaneously. That lets her track targets of different focal lengths at once. While looking through the scope with one eye, she can look for new targets with the other. That's why she doesn't need a spotter. She can operate alone, no matter the circumstances.
See, I told you she's a freak. No one would be able to control her.
No, there's one person who could.
Hey, you trying to get the boss killed?
Well, why don't we talk to him? See if he's willing to take her along.
I don't like this.
It's his decision to make. The two of them might even make a good team.
Hijo de puta, O sea, es que están usando aquí al Big Boss totalmente como cebo, tío. En plan, ala, tú vete con Quiet, que te quiere asesinar, pues mala suerte. Que se quiere escapar, pues se ha escapado. Que quiere hacerte ahí toda la traición con Cypher, quiere traicionarte, pues ala, también, pa'lante. Y eso lo sabe Ocelot, lo sabe Miller, y a mí nadie me había dicho nada. Qué bien, oye, qué bien. ¿Veis cómo esto había que haberlo escuchado mucho antes, macho?
Where is she?
You mean Quiet? In her cell, of course.
Why did you send her out with the boss on that mission?
She proved herself well enough, didn't she? The boss sure knows talent when he sees it.
That woman will never be one of us. She's targeting him.
Don't forget, we do owe her one.
What's that supposed to mean?
Remember what happened when she first got here? She shot down the aircraft Cypher sent after us. Not only that, she hit the cockpit. Who else could have done that? We're talking about a fighter jet traveling at Mach speed.
What's your point?
If she hadn't been there, the boss's chopper would be at the bottom of the ocean right now. Or it would have been followed right back to Mother Base. So let's say she does have some elaborate scheme in the works. If you want to catch her in the act, all we can do is sit back and wait. On the other hand, if she swears allegiance to the boss like our other Fulton recruits, he couldn't ask for a better partner.
She's got you fooled.
I have eyes on her. If she tries anything, she'll regret it. We lose nothing either way.
Maldito cabrón, el Ocelot, tío, agente triple, es que lo sabe todo, o sea, dice, ha evitado que, o sea, Quiet ha evitado que Cypher conozca la ubicación de la Mother Base, pero si lo saben de sobra, sí, se lo habrás dicho tú, cabrón. Qué Dios, qué rabia me da de escuchar todo esto. Bueno, vamos a dejar ya Quiet de lado, ¿no? Pobrecilla, ya le hemos dado bastante caña por hoy. Vamos a ir ahora un poquito con Huey. A ver, ¿qué pasó con Emmerich todos estos 9 años desde lo que pasó en Ground Zeroes, ¿no? Hasta hoy. Bueno, hasta el capítulo 1, ¿no? De esta serie. A ver.
It wasn't just Cypher. Back in the Caribbean, every eye in the world was turned on us. A private army, just a bunch of guys with guns, in possession of a nuke? Why wouldn't they be uncomfortable?
And that's why you made sure the inspection happened.
Well, I thought our best move was to prove to the UN through the IAEA that we had no nuke. Of course, I was against us having it in the first place, but that was Snake's decision.
The boss wasn't responsible.
Well, don't get me wrong, I still believed in Snake. I thought I was making the best decision for all of us, that's all. I figured we should get a third party to exonerate us before proof of the nuke did get out. And who better to do that than an organization with international authority?
So the truth is, you took it upon yourself to agree to an inspection arranged by the UN. Only the inspection was a ruse, and Cypher's strike force, XOF, showed up instead.
I had no idea that would happen.
Enough bullshit!
Oh, sure, like I could have known. You know, I was just trying to prove our innocence to the world. What's wrong with that?
We're not interested in the excuses you thought up. The truth is objective.
Just see it from my point of view.
You led XOF to the control tower. They seized it, giving them complete control over the base. Moments later, they detonated C4 on the strut legs. Anyone who'd managed to survive was hunted down by the assault force and their choppers.
You can't believe I did that on purpose.
That was the end of Mother Base. But it wasn't the end for you.
How can you... Look, think about it. I lost something too. I built Zeke and it got buried underwater. I am a victim.
That raises the big questions. Why were you the only one spared? You got away without a scratch. Why did Strangelove leave the base on the eve of the inspection? You two were close.
Strangelove?
And how did you manage to build something that surpasses Zeke in every way? Because you did everything they told you. You're the only one who didn't lose a thing. That is the truth.
I was taken away against my will. Skullface forced me to do his research these past 9 years. He used me. I lost 9 years.
9 years. We all lost 9 years. It wasn't just you.
I suppose blaming me makes you feel better, does it? But who's gonna give me back all the time I lost?
You're not getting anything back.
You're not a victim here, Emmerich. You're the perpetrator.
I didn't know anything.
Nobody can back that up.
Yeah, all the evidence is at the bottom of the ocean.
You know the hardest man to break. The type who's fooling himself. That takes time. It's easier to live a convenient...
Digo, a ver... Lo que quería parar esto... Joder, esta sí que ha estado interesante, tío. A ver, la verdad es que es muy sospechoso lo de Huey. Huey, en el Metal Gear Peace Walker, que es el que viene justo antes de Ground Zeroes, se une a la Mother Base al final del juego, ¿vale? Y pues básicamente es él el que crea el Metal Gear Psyche, que luego Paz lo utilizará para intentar destruir la Mother Base antigua sin éxito, ¿vale? La Mother Base ya vimos que se destruyó en Ground Zeroes. Hombre, sospechoso es lo de este tío, la verdad. Pero yo es que le veo demasiado tonto, ¿vale? No le veo tan inteligente como para plantearse él solo todo esto. No sé, no, yo no creo que haya sido nuestro querido amigo Huey Emmerich. Venga, seguimos.
It's easier to live a convenient lie than a painful truth. Is that the piece you've chosen, Doc?
I'm not lying.
Of course. Just let me check one or two things. On that day, you were in the control tower with them. Lucky you. That's how you got out unscathed. And you escaped on one of their choppers. Only you, right before the base went under.
They had me blindfolded the whole time. I've never been so scared. The whole flight I thought they'd kill me. But thinking of you kept me going. My comrades, all the way.
And?
There was a plane journey, then we traveled by road. When they finally took off the blindfold, I was in kind of a warehouse, on the floor. Afghanistan, it was that research lab. I couldn't believe they'd taken me halfway around the world. And soon enough, he came.
Skullface.
He's the one who's really behind that Mother Base attack. He forced me into that research.
What kind of research?
He told me to build a bipedal walking tank for the Soviet Union. Like Peace Walker. A system that could fire an ICBM-class nuclear weapon. That's how the Sahelanthropus project got started.
Sahelanthropus.
Those AI weapons I'd made in Costa Rica were like toys by comparison. A whole world apart from reptilian four-legged crawling and that ridiculous hunched-over bipedal waddling. My design evolved to the dawn of mankind. Sahelanthropus, the first steps towards humanity. An upright bipedal weapon system. Originally, Sahelanthropus was going to be a manned weapons platform. I designed a cockpit in its head, and I planned to fill it with water as a buffering agent.
Like how Paz modified Zeke for human control.
Don't compare me to some amateur. I designed it for human control from the beginning. The problem was miniaturizing the posture control AI. You remember the reptile pod?
The AI that controlled your unmanned weapons.
Attaching it externally makes it vulnerable, so this time I wanted it beneath the armor. Meaning I had to make the AI smaller. I got it down to less than 1/10 the size without any loss in computation speed. But it was still too big for the cockpit. There wasn't enough room for the pilot. If I made the head bigger, its body would have to be bigger to support it. Too big to be practical. In the end, human piloting was taken off the table. I tested a remote control system too, but there was the time lag and I wasn't satisfied with its precision either. Plus, it would be useless if the enemy jammed it. So next, I went back to trying an AI-only system. To do that, I had the AI pods recovered from Nicaragua. This was a hybrid AI, a combination of Peace Walker's reptile and mammal pods. The only AIs that had ever successfully operated an unmanned nuclear weapon system.
Really? You'd need some help to get that working. Expert help.
Did you work with someone?
I worked alone.
You did that yourself?
Well, that's the thing. The AI didn't pan out in the end either. But I did finally get Sahelanthropus walking by folding over its upper body to lower its center of gravity. The first upright bipedal locomotive weapon system in the history of mankind. I guess technically it falls into the anthropoid ape category.
I don't see the benefit of having it stand taller.
On terrain with significant differences in elevation like Afghanistan, you need a body that's vertically adaptable. That also lets it attack from long range while using mountain ridges for cover. So, making it walk upright was the most important factor in giving it superior height capability. As the name suggests, that was the whole point of Sahelanthropus. But I was being pushed for results. Having the AI mounted externally would have been the fastest way to get it working. I just needed more data so it could maintain its balance. But Skullface refused to wait. He dismissed the idea of AI control and took Sahelanthropus away from me before I could finish it.
But it was walking when it came after you.
That's just it. I don't understand how Skullface got it to move upright, without a pilot or an AI. And walking at that speed, too. It's beyond anything I could have imagined. This is like the Wright brothers making it to the moon. I'm just as clueless as you are.
Seguro que lo con... La pelirroja esa, tío.
I have no idea.
La del hombre de fuego.
Experiments took place at that cave. I've never seen it anywhere else. Besides, it's still just an incomplete prototype at this point, and nothing but a paper tiger. Even if it can walk, it's far from being a viable weapons platform. It wouldn't be useful in actual battle.
Sí, yo me acuerdo que había dos.
But not as a member of Diamond Dogs. I still don't trust him. That work for you?
Fine by me. He can't be allowed any contact with staff either.
Yeah. A lot of the guys would love some payback for 9 years ago. We still need him alive. But we have to restrict his movements. He can only go where we tell him. And of course, the interrogations will continue. He worked for that skull bastard for nearly a decade. He still has more to tell us.
How long are we gonna press him?
If our investigation shows he really had nothing to do with the attack, we'll reconsider his place here. But I don't expect that to happen. Remember that water tank-shaped object in Emmerich's lab in the Soviet base camp? The thing that started talking to you like a possessed answering machine.
Hombre, claro que me acuerdo.
That was a pod built for housing the AI used to control unmanned weapons. You remember, back in '74 in Costa Rica. It was in those machines you fought there. They were designated Pupa, Chrysalis, Cocoon, and Basilisk.
Los enemigos de Metal Gear Peace Walker.
Called a reptile pod. Emmerich created it. It mainly handled the machine's posture control and autonomous behavior. But the Basilisk, aka Peace Walker, also featured a second AI pod. That one was called the Mammal Pod, and it was created by Dr. Strangelove. She tried to recreate the boss's personality through the Mammal Pod, but you pulled out its memory boards. That's when it transferred its own functions to its reptile pod. Just like a human brain compensating for damage by using the remaining healthy parts. The result was a unique entity, a hybrid of the reptile and the mammal. It sank to the bottom of Lake Nicaragua with Peace Walker. But apparently they salvaged it and transported it to that lab. Don't let it deceive you, Snake. It may sound like the boss, but it has neither a personality nor a will. Like Emmerich says, it's just a machine.
Eso último lo dice porque es que hay muchas cosas que contaros en esta cinta. Lo primero, ha nombrado a todos los enemigos de Metal Gear Peace Walker, ¿no? El Chrysalis, la unidad reptil. Luego también ha estado hablando de Strangelove, que ya la han nombrado antes y yo no he comentado nada. Strangelove es una tía que aparecía en Metal Gear Peace Walker, era del bando enemigo, y nuestro amigo Hideo Kojima acababa enamorándose de ella. Luego han hablado de la unidad mamífero esta. La unidad mamífero, ¿os acordáis que vimos un círculo con una luz roja que hablaba y tenía la voz de Boss, la mentora de nuestro Big Boss, ¿no? La rubia de Metal Gear Solid 3. Pues eso es lo que ha explicado muy bien Kaz. Es una IA, ¿vale? Que lo que hace es pues que funcione que funcionase en su momento el Peace Walker. Y supongo yo que el Sahelanthropus ese pues o funcionaba con esa IA o lo estaba controlando la chica esa que lleva la máscara de Psychomantis, la que controla al hombre de fuego. Esa no lo sé, no sé si llevaba la IA o no, porque la IA la vimos dentro de un almacén, ¿no? De un laboratorio de investigación, pero no la vimos dentro del Sahelanthropus. A lo mejor es que tienen más de una IA de esas. Al igual que vimos que aparte del Sahelanthropus había otro prototipo de Metal Gear bípedo ahí, o sea que agüita, agüita. Ya te digo yo que en el Metal Gear Peace Walker ese, en el de la PSP, había... Por lo menos había 5 tipos de Metal Gear distintos. En este yo no sé cuántos va a haber. En este tiene que ser la hostia, porque si es el último juego de la saga. Vamos a seguir escuchando porque están muy interesantes, gente, la verdad, las cintas. Los que hayáis seguido la saga de Metal Gear lo entenderéis perfectamente. Una barbaridad de información muy, muy, muy interesante. Con la tontería llevamos ya media hora. Yo no sé si os estará pasando rápido o lento, pero a mí me está encantando, la verdad. Vamos con los siguientes interrogatorios a Huey Emmerich.
You called that thing Sahelanthropus. Where does the name come from?
Well, several years ago, an excavation team discovered a hominid skull in the Sahel region.
Central Africa, the Southern Sahara.
Cypher gave the specimen the name Sahelanthropus, man of Sahel. And then they covered the whole thing up.
Why?
They probably wanted to monopolize information about human evolution to have a head start in their genetic research. At least, until they had an idea of what they'd found.
It was that big of a discovery, huh?
Sahelanthropus was a gracile hominid, estimated to have lived about 7 million years ago. What's significant about it is how its skull's foramen magnum faces down. In other words, its spinal column supported its head from underneath.
It stood upright.
Right. Which would mean Sahelanthropus walked upright 3 million years before Australopithecus, making it the world's oldest human species.
Walking upright. I get it. Hence the name Sahelanthropus for your machine.
Walking upright was the decisive difference between our ancestors and other anthropoids. Our brains could get heavier once they were supported by the spinal column. That led to the use of tools and the development of complex communication through language. Only man is capable of this. My creation will be the progenitor of all bipedal weapon platforms.
And you did this for Cypher?
No, not at all. Sahelanthropus is the best proof that I never betrayed you guys.
What do you mean?
The reconstructed Sahelanthropus skull looked exactly like the skull we used as our logo 9 years ago in the Caribbean.
An army without a nation. Outside the world order.
The design was based on Pangaea, the supercontinent that existed 250 million years ago, right?
Yeah. When the world was a single landmass. That concept's at the source of our strength.
I felt the same way about Sahelanthropus. Sure, I was forced to build it under their orders. but I always wanted to put its technology back in our hands someday. That's the reason I incorporated the old insignia into Sahelanthropus's name. Don't you see? That's how much I was thinking about you guys.
Oh, I see, all right. I see someone desperate to cover his ass. You can say whatever you want after the fact. But that skull also symbolizes somebody
Bueno, pues ha estado interesante esta cinta, ¿no? Skullface. Te habla ahí de... Espera, voy a parar esto un segundo, Huey. No tengas tanta prisa. Ahora le damos al play otra vez. Que no tengas prisa, te digo, Huey. Madre mía, el tío ansias. Digo que está muy interesante, te hablan de... Yo eso no sé si es verdad o no, ¿no? O sea, se supone que el primer ser que caminaba a dos patas que se descubrió era el supuesto Australopithecus, ¿no? En su tiempo. Tampoco lo toméis al pie de la letra y me llaméis incultivado de mierda porque no estoy muy puesto en historia. Pero está interesante que te habla ahí del Australopithecus, de un supuesto homínido, ¿no? Que se descubrió antes que él y que lo han mantenido en secreto la gente de Cypher. Está muy chulo esto. Te habla de cuando la Tierra no estaba dividida en 5 continentes, cuando era una masa, que luego ya sabéis que se separó, ¿no? Está chulo, tío. Yo es que a mí la historia siempre me ha encantado. A ver, rebobíname esto, please. No. Venga. No. Esta.
Snake, you finally came. Just don't record this, okay?
Not recording anything. What's this about?
What I'm about to say stays between you and me. It's about the weapon to surpass Metal Gear. Do you know a researcher by the name of Clark? He works in the biotech industry, real advanced stuff. His area is bioengineering, but lately he's also gotten into genetic research.
Never heard of him.
Well then, what do you know about cloning?
I think I've heard enough.
Hold on, this is important. Cloning lets you create a genetic copy of an organism. You take the nucleus of one of its cells, and you swap it with the nucleus of an unfertilized egg from another member of the same species. They started out working with plants, but since then they've had success with other organisms, including mammals. It's a hot area for a lot of places right now. Corporations, universities, research groups. There's no shortage of scientists out to get famous and patent their work, with morality taking a back seat.
Isn't that a little outside your field?
It's got nothing to do with my research. But I thought it might be of interest to you. Cloning, and Dr. Clark, I mean.
Go on.
Now, this is really highly classified stuff. But I've heard that an American biotech company has successfully cloned a human being. What's more, it happened over 10 years ago, and the researcher behind it was Dr. Clark. You've really never heard of him?
I don't meet many doctors.
This Dr. Clark is a complete ghost, even to others in his field. His age, where he comes from, that might not be his real name, and I can't even say for sure he's a he. Clark's employer, ATGC, its company motto is embracing your hopes, preserving talent.
What does this have to do with me?
Cypher.
Cypher. Qué interesante eso, ¿no?
For ATGC, and they have connections to
Oh.
DARPA. Cypher couldn't function without the communications network DARPA's built. Meaning, Cypher has to be a part of the Pentagon. Or at least, the two are joined at the hip. DARPA is a driving force behind human cloning. It's a pretty high priority project for them. And this Dr. Clark, some say he's a pivotal player in Cypher. But that's not all. Every cell nucleus in an organism contains the genetic information for that organism. Think of it as a blueprint for life. Clark appears to be working on how to decode this information and rearrange it at will. If you could do that, it would mean being able to custom design human beings for specific purposes. Can you believe that? Suppose for a moment that this is all fact. A man of your talents, if your genetic information died with you, that would be a terrible loss for mankind. But what if mankind could preserve you for future generations? by cloning you.
All right, enough. I get the idea.
Look, I know it's inductive reasoning, but this weapon to surpass Metal Gear they're developing in Africa, I believe it's something that uses this new technology. Speaking as a fellow scientist, it chills me to the bone.
That's rich coming from you.
If genes serve as our blueprint, then I wonder if they include an impulse that drives us to tweak the design. Can you imagine that? Genes encoded with information that wants its children to decode it. Is life itself putting the direction of our next evolution in the hands of scientists? I guess it would take some real arrogance to believe that. And yet, it could be what Cypher's after.
I think you're barking up the wrong tree. But that was an interesting story. It'd make a good movie.
You have to believe me.
Where'd you hear all this anyway?
Where? I just overheard it in bits and pieces while I was forced to do that research for them.
Right.
Wait a minute. Look, I want to help you. I want to be of service here. I'm risking my life with this.
Is that so? Maybe it's time we brought someone else into the conversation.
No, not him. Not Ocelot. You can't do this.
Uy, 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 a que voy a tener yo razón con todo esto de que Ocelot es corrupto, por eso no quiere que le llame. Tiene que ser bueno por huevos. Y lo del Dr. Clark, yo al principio he empezado a pensar, digo, joder, yo a mí el único doctor que me suena es el que apareció al principio del juego y que acabó muerto. Pero luego ya he empezado a contar cosas y tengo varias dudas. Por ejemplo, ese tal Dr. Clark puede ser el que hizo posible el proyecto este de Les Enfants Terribles, ¿no? De los 3 clones de Big Boss, Solid, Liquid y Solidus Snake. Puede ser ese, puede ser también, que no sé si son la misma persona o no, el creador de los soldados Genoma. Lo de los soldados Genoma es una historia buenísima, la verdad, que merece la pena recordar para la historia de los videojuegos por los siglos de los siglos. ¿Recordáis que al principio los videojuegos, no, como no tenían nada de potencia de la PlayStation 1, pues por ejemplo todos los enemigos solían ser iguales, ¿vale? Solían tener el mismo aspecto, nada de tener aquí un blanquito, por allí había un niga, por allí otro con máscara, por allí otro con casco. Antes no se podían hacer todas esas cosas, ¿no? Entonces todos los soldados eran iguales, o sea, eran prácticamente clones. Iban todos vestidos igual, todos tenían la misma cara. Os hablo de Metal Gear 1 en la Play 1. Entonces al señor Kojima, o a la persona que hiciese el guión de este juego, se le ocurrió una muy buena idea, y era darle una explicación a que todos los soldados fuesen iguales. Y creó los soldados Genoma, ¿no? Que me parece que fue el famoso Dr. Clark el que consiguió clonar a un soldado. No sé qué soldado fue, no sé si es Big Boss o es otro, eso ya se me escapa, la verdad. Pero consiguió clonar la explicación del juego a que todos los soldados fuesen iguales. Era que el Dr. Clark había cogido a uno y había clonado a todos. Entonces se supone que por eso todos los soldados eran iguales. Y joder, macho, la magia de los videojuegos. Es que mira, ¿ves? Esto te hace pensar en todo lo que ha avanzado, tío. Mira el negro ahí, este aquí, el del casco, el de la máscara de gas, el del escudo. Es que está muy currado, ¿eh? Parece fácil todo eso, macho, pero eso requiere dedicación y tiempo. Y luego también han hablado de la agencia DARPA y me ha dado por pensar una cosa, y es que en Metal Gear 1, los que lo hayáis jugado, recordáis ese momento épico, ¿no? En el que al principio del juego Solid Snake se encuentra con el jefe DARPA y tiene una conversación con él, pero luego se acaba enterando de que ese no era el jefe DARPA, que el jefe DARPA ya estaba muerto, ¿vale? Esto es un poco spoiler, pero bueno, es que para entender este juego tendréis que saber todo del 1, por eso no me corto. Al final resulta que el jefe DARPA no es el mismo, sino hay una persona que tiene una especie de camuflaje un poco extraño, ¿vale? Ya me gustaría a mí tenerlo. Y que se puede hacer pasar por otras personas. No sé si tiene que tocarles o qué tiene que hacer, pero pues por ejemplo se podría hacer pasar perfectamente por Big Boss. Y en esa ocasión se hace pasar por el jefe DARPA. Y es que el caso es que el nombre de Dr. Clark lo tengo ahí reciente en la mente, pero no consigo averiguar de qué. De todas formas, seguro que lo que hago es, antes de grabarme el próximo capítulo, mañana, me meteré un rato a indagar quién era el Dr. Clark. Lo que pasa es que me da miedo, porque eso sí que me da miedo, ¿ves? Porque ahora a lo mejor me pongo a buscar Dr. Clark en el Metal Gear Solid 1 y te vas a una wiki, te dicen quién es, pero claro, luego a lo mejor en este juego es un spoiler como una casa. Entonces me da mucho miedo, la verdad, mirar esas cosas. Yo creo que prefiero esperarme y ya me enteraré de quién es ese tal Dr. Clark. Dejamos a Huey ya por fin y vamos con el cargamento de Cypher. Llevo ya 40 minutos. Yo creo que no me va a dar tiempo a escuchar todas las cintas en el capítulo de hoy, porque no quiero que me quede un vídeo de 2 horas, no por otra cosa. Venga, dale para adelante, mineral de cobre.
Boss, I have the report on that cargo we stole from Cypher's truck.
Ah, vale, ya me acuerdo. El camión de los Skulls.
Naturally, the main compound is copper. There's also a small amount of cobalt. Nothing unusual so far. Southern Zaire is a well-known copper belt. However, in addition to these, we also detected a trace amount of uranium. The content percentage, though, is too low for nuclear development. It most likely came from Shinkalobwe mine. That's where the uranium in that area comes from. The mine's closed, as all the high-purity uranium ore dried up a long time ago. But you could probably still find it there in small quantities. That said, there are plenty of other uranium mines that are in operation, like in Niger, Namibia, South Africa. Why go to an abandoned mine to scrape up whatever's left and ship it out in mass quantities without refining it? They were transporting that yellow cake too, which would suggest they have the technology to refine uranium. Anyway, that about sums it up. Unfortunately, the analysis of that yellow cake is taking a little longer. I'll let you know when it's done.
Joder, pues es curioso, pero esta es una cinta amarilla de las que se supone que son muy importantes y me ha parecido más importante estas de Huey, las blancas, que esta del mineral de cobre, que si uranio, que si malaquita... A ver, óxido de uranio, ¿qué es esto? Esto decía que teníamos que esperar al análisis, vamos a ver.
Boss, sorry to keep you waiting. We finally finished analyzing that yellow cake Cypher was moving. There was nothing unusual about the composition of the yellow cake itself. Most of it was oxidized uranium, with the rest being impurities, various metals as well as traces of organic matter. What's interesting is the composition of these impurities. When we checked them against the impurities found in the copper ore, it was clear the yellow cake didn't come from Shinkalobwe, meaning they went to the trouble of mining 2 sources of uranium, then transported them together in different states. Another thing, we detected a very thin layer of highly enriched uranium in the middle of the yellow cake. Now that is very interesting. It may not be a lot, but it points to the existence of uranium-enriching technology. After all, yellow cake can't naturally produce highly enriched uranium. If they could mass-produce this, they'd be just one step away from a gun barrel-type nuclear bomb. But uranium enrichment requires advanced technology and a large-scale facility. If that kind of place existed in Zaire, the Soviet Union wouldn't sit idly by. And there's another question. Where were they transporting the yellow cake and malachite uranium? The first place that comes to mind is South Africa. The government was supposed to have abandoned nuclear weapons development after caving to international pressure. But rumors persist that it's continued in secret. Plus, ZRS were escorting the truck, and they're based out of South Africa. And then South Africa does have an abandoned test site. If Cypher's involved with nuclear development in South Africa. But how would that fit with their weapon to surpass Metal Gear? We need more information.
Shinkalobwe. There's a name I haven't heard in a while.
The U.S. bought a lot of uranium from Shinkalobwe mine during World War II for the Manhattan Project. They even sent a squad from the Army Corps of Engineers to reopen the mine after it was flooded. That's how good its uranium must have been. With that, the world's first nuclear test was a success. Shinkalobwe uranium might have been used in the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs, too. Just hearing its name is like seeing all the phantoms of the war rise up to haunt us. But all the uranium's dried up, and the mine's been closed for years.
So someone reopened it?
Right. Zero-risk security seized control of the area and were forcing locals to work in it. And the Zairean government was getting a slice of what they took in exchange for looking the other way. Mobutu has to finance his tastes somehow. He'll gladly sell the rights to some old mine. The question is, why would zero-risk security do this kind of thing?
Or rather, why were their employers, Cypher, interested in an abandoned mine? They'd be getting trace amounts of uranium, yet to the naked eye it appears to be ordinary malachite, meaning security would be lax. Not a very efficient way of obtaining it, but easier to move.
But how would they enrich it at its destination?
Did the yellow cake really have a layer of highly enriched uranium in it?
Having trouble believing it?
No. If they say it's real, then it's real. In which case, they might have some enrichment method that we don't know about.
And this was to test it out.
It's possible. And that would mean it's almost complete.
Madre mía, vaya paranoia con el uranio, tú. La que tiene el día, los de Cypher con el maldito uranio, tú. Parecen como los gitanos robando cobre, ¿sabes? Pues esto igual, los de Cypher con el uranio. Ah, pues no me jodas. África hoy. El mercado legendario, fuerzas privadas, FPAs, fuerzas privadas, mercenarios locales. Esto es un poco de la situación de África. Esto de los Walker Gear sí que está interesante. Fuerza privada Zero Risk Security. Zero. Fuerza privada Rogue Coyote, minas de Kungenga y el choque étnico. Y la fábrica de los muertos. Esto sí que está interesante. Venga, vamos a darle. Es que estas yo creo que van a ser un poco caca, pero bueno, voy a ponerlas a ver qué tal. El mercenario legendario.
Ever since the attack on your unit 9 years ago, the name Big Boss has become known the world over.
What do you mean?
Those of your men who survived traveled far and wide. They fought throughout the world. In fact, they're part of the reason we have all these PFs now. Every one of them suffered their own phantom pain from losing you. Talking about you wherever they went helped to heal their wounds. Your actions and words, your legend, has been told on every battlefield they've set foot on. Obviously, as the tales have spread, the truth's been distorted, painted over. Big Boss sacrificed himself to show us the threat that Cypher poses. He sounded a warning, so it goes.
A warning?
Too much power destroys the hands that hold it. Apparently, you chose to be a living example of that.
I never said any of that.
The moment any truth is passed on, it starts turning into fiction. The problem is, fiction inspires people more than facts. To the world, you're now the legendary mercenary Big Boss. The lessons you've taught the PFs are the reason they're so widespread. They're the reason they've survived. And you know what they all aspire to? To one day go nuclear, just like you did, and stand up to Cypher.
Of all the stupid things you could do.
They'll never understand what you really wanted. Heroes are misunderstood. It takes a man of the same caliber to understand what drives them. Bottom line is, these guys want to be like their hero, Big Boss. And deep down, they all have their eyes on nuclear weapons. They say that a nuke is the only means of standing against Cypher. But these days, it's becoming little more than a slogan to rally the troops and survive in a cutthroat business.
Currently, there are 3 major PFs who've expanded into Central Africa. CFA, Rogue Coyote, and Zero Risk Security. HEC's investigations have shown there's almost no overlap between their areas of operation. It's not so much a turf war, more like they have a gentleman's agreement. If you do cross paths with them, you probably won't have to face more than one at a time. Still, don't expect a walk in the park. The CFA, Contract Forces of Africa. These guys are a major player. Their head office is in Pretoria, South Africa. That's also where the South African Defense Force is headquartered. We think the two are closely connected. An HEC investigation revealed that most of the CFA's operators are former SADF soldiers. South Africa has been locked in struggles with neighboring regimes for years. That means constant action. And we know better than anyone that's the best kind of training. A company drawing its recruits from hardened military vets. You can bet they know how to handle themselves. Do not underestimate them. Within the CFA is a company of soldiers made up mainly of locally hired operators. They speak Afrikaans to communicate with personnel from the CFA. But if you notice any speaking the local language, that's them. Though hired from the local population, they were originally part of a paramilitary group, so they'll have plenty of combat experience. And unlike their days shooting junkyard rifles out of beat-up pickup trucks, the CFA now supplies them with the latest gear from the West. On top of that, they've been combat trained by the South African Army. All that adds up to a much stronger fighting force. So don't brush them off. Look at the Angola-Zaire border region. The east bank of the Munene River in particular. It's a microcosm of a problem that stretches all across Africa. There's a civil war going on in Angola fought between the government MPLA and the Western-backed UNITA. Zaire is still a dictatorship under President Mobutu, but numerous uprisings have broken out in its remote regions. With all the trouble elsewhere keeping their hands full, neither government has control over their side of the border. They depend on militias and PFs, as do the rebels. Government forces, guerrillas, militants, groups of all shapes and sizes hawk whatever resources they can to hire PFs. Conflict brings PFs. PFs expand the war zone, and more conflicts erupt in a continuous chain reaction. Sounds like our kind of work. Mother Base could grow by leaps and bounds.
Pues no han estado tan interesantes como las anteriores, pero bueno, no han estado mal, ¿no? Yo voy a ir poniéndolas todas, ¿vale? Porque habrá gente que dirá, joder, yo es que quiero escucharlas todas. Entonces, los que no le interesen, pues las pueden saltar, obviamente. Y los que le interesen, pues las escucharán como yo. A mí es que realmente me interesan todas. Lo que pasa es que, hombre, tengo más hype por escuchar unas que otras. ¿Qué he hecho? No sé. Ah, vale, digo, no sé dónde le he dado. Vale. Madre mía, nos quedan 26 cintas aún. Bueno, de aquí nos quedan 12, que es lo importante. Pero para el capítulo de hoy no me va a dar tiempo a enseñaros todas. Vamos a ver, yo creo, las de África. Y ya a partir de la fábrica de los muertos, ¿vale? Esta incluida las vamos a dejar todas para el próximo vídeo. En el próximo vídeo vamos a ver estas. Y en el de hoy vamos a ver estas tres. Venga. Final 1 hora, tú. Madre mía, venga, pa'lante.
Hard to believe how many of those bipedal weapons have popped up around Africa. When did that start? No more than 6 months ago. Didn't really hit me until I came here. They're not supposed to be in use yet. Emmerich says they were still doing the last round of fine-tuning. The doctor has no idea. His research has already hit the black market. Both sides of the Iron Curtain will have it by now. Even so, they're spreading much too fast. Sure, the Walker gears can operate in any terrain. Their mobility's just as good in the jungle as it is in the desert. That would come in handy in a place like Africa. They are modules that can one day be used as nuclear weapon systems. And with that in mind, the numbers are way too large. There must be another reason they're so widespread. Like what? It's all about needs. To small-time outfits like most of these private forces, this product is a dream come true. Hell, it goes beyond PFs. This is the ultimate weapon, the forbidden fruit, for anyone with an enemy to fight and people to defend. A nuclear deterrent. Exactly. Sounds familiar, huh? PFs are all operating off your playbook. You created these times. But could this be the new weapon in Africa that Emmerich talked about? If it is, why is Cypher letting everyone and his brother get their hands on one? What comes next? Selling nuclear weapons in the open? Making them public property? Why don't they give that a try? Then the next war really will be fought with sticks. Right. The man we're dealing with isn't foolish enough to make a suicide pact with the world. So, what is Cypher really up to?
Zero-risk security aren't as hardcore a military outfit compared to the other two PFs in this region. The company sends operators to conflict regions around the world, not just Africa. They have decades of combined experience. They're also based out of South Africa. Their headquarters is in Johannesburg. A lot of their work involves corporate security for South African companies, but a good number of their operators are retired South African military. So don't mistake them for a bunch of security guards. Rogue Coyote operates mainly out of Africa these days. Of the 3 PFs, they're the smallest. However, they scooped up most of the Rhodesian SAS after the country collapsed 4 years ago. Picture their entire organization as one big special forces unit. With Rhodesia a British colony, the Rhodesian SAS had its origins in 22 SAS Sea Squadron. They started out as a group known as the Southern Rhodesia Volunteers, but in '51 they were incorporated into 22 SAS as members of the British Commonwealth and deployed to fight guerrillas in the Malayan emergency. Even now, 22 SAS keeps the Sea Squadron designation empty in recognition of their service. In a way, you could say the SAS almost makes up the core of Rogue Coyote. Later on, they were bolstered by other talent, including former Celis Scouts and 32 Battalion. These guys are direct descendants of the best special forces in the world. They won't go down without a fight. Don't get careless. Kunganga Mine. A civil war's been going on in that region for the last 20 years. It's being fought by what are now two ethnic groups, the Buta and the Mbele. Originally, you could barely tell them apart, but the reason for the current armed conflict goes back to World War I. After the war, their land was colonized by a European power, and it decided to give local control to the Buta. That split the two groups into rulers and subjects, laying the foundations for an inevitable civil war. The friction between them remained even after they won independence from Europe. The Buta are holding on to power to this day, and the Mbele rebels continue to fight back. The conflict is funded by locally mined gold, rare metals, diamonds. They've used the money from those to arm themselves, buy oil, and even hire PFs. The Buta administration owns the mining rights to Kunganga Mine. But most of the laborers are Mbele, who they've taken prisoner. The product they've gouged out of their land is bought up by cheap Western corporations. And the civil war is fueled by the profits. That's how it goes. One country's people is split apart by another country. Then the two groups tear up their own land for money in order to fight each other. Now this civil war started by a foreign power is the norm, and it's sucking up all the country's resources. PFs are just the same. They follow the money, taking war with them wherever they go. That goes for us too. It's an endless river of bloody retaliation, and we're standing downstream. Should we make a stand and staunch the flow? Or wade in amongst the corpses and make a bigger splash than the rest? We'll follow your lead, boss.
Bueno, pues no han estado mal al final estos últimos. Bueno, gente, pues como os he dicho, nos vamos a ir quedando aquí, ¿vale? En el próximo capítulo haremos misión. Y pues espero que sea una misión como la del capítulo anterior. La anterior fue muy corta, la hice en media hora. A ver si hacemos una así cortita, macho. Y me da tiempo a enseñar el resto de casetes. Y nada, la verdad es que me ha entrado un poquito de sueño. Tuve una hora seguida escuchando casetes. Los que os hayáis quedado al final, me gustaría que pusieseis un comentario para saber quiénes sois, lo primero, que estaría bastante bien. Aunque seáis de esos que no comentan nunca, que hay mucha gente que yo sé que ve los vídeos y no comenta nunca. Venga, animaros, hombre, que un día es un día. Y no por nada, no para saber si os ha gustado o no, porque en realidad el vídeo yo no he tenido que hacer nada. Simplemente le he dado a grabar, le he dado al play a las cintas y pa'lante, a leer. Pero sí para saber lo que os ha parecido la información. Obviamente, si no conocéis la saga Metal Gear y no habéis jugado a los 4 juegos anteriores de la saga Metal Gear Solid, mejor dicho, no os enteréis de nada. Más que a los 4 anteriores hay que incluir el Portable Ops y el Peace Walker, o sea los 6 anteriores. Entonces a esa gente que conozca las cosas y que quiera aportar algo de información, algún dato, opinar sobre mis conspiraciones, poner sus conspiraciones propias, lo que sea, esperando por favor, mientras no sea spoiler de este juego, en plan, yo me he pasado el juego y te voy a contar esto, no, por favor, eso no. Pero todo lo demás será bien recibido, ¿vale? Me lo leeré y os contestaré. A mí me gusta un montón hablar con vosotros sobre estas cosas, la verdad. Además, en este momento de la historia, ¿no? Que parece que el pastel aún no está descubierto, pero está a punto de caramelo. O sea, es que ya está a punto de descubrirse aquí el salseo máximo. Entonces en este momento de la historia es cuando más me gusta hablar con vosotros, a ver qué pensáis vosotros de por dónde van a ir los tiros, qué puede pasar, por ejemplo con Ocelot y con Huey, ¿no? Que tienen ahí una aliada, con Kaz, que el tío me tiene bastante preocupado. No sé, saber lo que os ha parecido, ¿no? Un poquito. Y nada, me despido ya de vosotros aquí con la tontería. 58 minutos, casi 59, madre mía, poco más y llegamos a la hora. Y con la anterior hora y media. Venga, un saludo chicos, hasta la próxima.